Hi, my name is Alex Benson, and I'm here to talk to you about abortion, not about pro-life or pro-choice, but on parental consent laws on abortion. Parental consent laws started appearing not long after abortion was made legal in Roe v. Wade in 1973. Massachusetts was the first state to enact such a law, and soon more states followed. Today, 43 states enacted this law, but only 32 actually enforce it. California does not require parental consent, but has tried to pass the law several times. The law states that any minor under the age of 18 must get parental consent from at least one parent, and in some states, both parents, or have a doctor notify the parents 48 hours in advance before getting an abortion. The main reason for this law even existing is to protect minors. I, however, think parental consent laws fail to protect minors from the dangers of abortion. And my two claims supporting this are that parental consent laws raise health risks for the child, and parental consent laws have done little to no change in the abortion rate. So with the passing of the parental consent laws, back alley abortions increase. Back alley abortions are abortions often performed by non-licensed people in unsanitary conditions and using primitive methods. Back alley abortions are also extremely dangerous for the woman and can be fatal. Girls who are afraid to tell their parents because of fear of being abused or kicked out of their home are more likely to turn to back alley abortions. For example, in Detroit, a 16-year-old boy beat his pregnant underage girlfriend with a bat at her request to abort a fetus, trying to avoid having to tell her parents. And in Indiana, a minor named Becky Bell died from a back alley abortion rather than telling her parents. Both states enforce parental consent laws, and other states that enforce them have very similar stories. For girls who have an open and healthy relationship and would normally tell their parents about an abortion, with or without the law, makes the law irrelevant for them. But for girls who are hostile or even violent families, this law is in some sense dangerous to them. If a girl who lives in a hostile environment and has to tell her parents, she has a greater risk of being emotionally as well as physically harmed, which defaces the point of protecting minors. In a study conducted by Medscape News, 30% of the participants surveyed did not tell their parents about an abortion out of fear of violence or because they'd already experienced violence before. Or on the other side of the spectrum, families who may not be violent or hostile could refuse for the child to get an abortion because they do not believe in them and force the child to have a baby even though it puts the child's health or life at risk. The law was created to help protect minors, but childbirth is not risk-free either. In fact, childbirth, according to the National Abortion Federation, is 10 times more dangerous than abortion in the first trimester. 0.6 out of 100,000 abortions resulted in death, while 13 out of 100,000 live births resulted in death. My final point for the increase of health risks is that it can cause a delay in the abortion process. The longer you wait to get an abortion, the more dangerous it becomes, and the risk of complications increase significantly. Most states do have a sort of loophole in the law where minors can receive a judicial bypass on getting parental consent for cases where the families may be violent or for other similar reasons, but for the total processing time of the bypass adds up to 22 days, which is making it more dangerous by delaying abortion to get an abortion. The majority of abortions occur within the 12 to 13th week of pregnancy, and this is the safest time to get an abortion because the procedure is relatively uncomplicated. Whereas when you start getting into the 16th week and beyond, the risks start to rise and the procedures become more complicated and dangerous. According to the National Abortion Federation, almost 1/3 of abortions obtained after 12 weeks are by teenagers. By having parental consent laws, delays in getting an abortion are more frequent and cause greater risk for minors as opposed to protecting them. And then my second point or claim was that the law has done little to no change on the abortion rate. While some of the hope of having parental consent laws was to help decrease the abortion rate, and in a sense the abortion rate in state has decreased, however, out-of-state abortions have increased. In Virginia, for example, the abortion rate had decreased ever so slightly, but out-of-state abortions, which did not require parental consent, increased by 11.11%. And even if the abortion rate did increase, it was an extremely significant rate. And in Virginia, for example, again, the rate had already been decreasing prior to the parental consent laws. And with the law enforced, the rate dropped 0.5%, but became more inconsistent. By putting up restrictions for minors to get an abortion in their own state due to parental consent, they are starting to run away to other states that do not require consent, making the law irrelevant because minors are still finding ways to get an abortion and they could go to unsafe routes like back alley abortions. Another idea behind the law was to try and catch rapists. The rapists would take girls who had been raped and become pregnant due to the raping, sometimes to get an abortion without parental consent. The thought was that by having to have parental consent in order to obtain an abortion would help catch cases like these and stop the rapist. However, though with the parental consent laws in existence, rapists are more likely to perform back alley abortions in order to avoid the law and getting caught and having to go through like jail or anything. Most states require for girls to be a legal adult, which 18, before they can receive an abortion without parental consent. And in some cases, girls who are close enough to turning the legal age are more likely to wait to get the abortion versus telling their parents early on in the pregnancy, which results in an increase in second trimester abortions and greater risk to the child. The law is doing little to no effect on the abortion rate, according to a survey taken off of 6 states by the New York Times. States actually saw a decrease in the abortion rate when the law was not in effect. And in Texas, Tennessee, and Virginia, for example, the rate decreased when the law was not in effect and rose when the law was enforced. The law was doing the opposite from what it was intended to do. Overall, I think the law is harmful, not helpful. While the law may have good intentions, actually resulting in greater risk. I also believe that if a girl is old enough to have a baby, she's old enough to have an abortion, and she should have the right to decide what to do with her body and her baby. Thank you.
Can you tell me what the time was? Because I don't have my timer out.
6:17.
All right, thank you.
Walmart. Oh. I thought you were asking for the time right now.
I'm sorry, no, how long was the speech?
It was just a little over 6 minutes.
So if I write 6:17, that'll be pretty close. But only because of coincidence. Okay.
I can make an argument.
No, it's all right. It's perfectly understandable. That's a good illustration of a fallacy we'll be talking about later. All right, Alex, the proposition is pretty clear. The secondary issues, excuse me, are labeled at the beginning, but you're kind of rushing through them. And when you get to the first point, it actually sounds like there are 3 secondary claims there before you get to what is actually your second secondary claim. So you might be over-organizing a little bit. Like I said, your first point is rushed. The last point's labeled when you get to it, but between those two you had multiple claims that are probably minor claims supporting that first point. So we need to structure that a little more clearly, or at least present it a little bit more clearly. It's probably structured fine on the outline. The proof that you offered, I thought you had okay examples. I'm not sure how convincing a couple of examples are of back alley abortions, but you do try to give some support for that claim. I thought you had better statistical evidence on the rate of later abortions as a consequence of the laws. I thought that worked pretty effectively. The bypass laws that you mentioned do seem to undermine the first point. And then, in essence, if the second point's going to be true, then the first point's going to be invalid. That's, I don't know how you quantify those differences. I know that you've attempted to do so. I'm not sure that it's particularly convincing. The third point about people going, I guess it's the third point, maybe it's another point under that second point, that people are driving to other states to get these abortions, and you could easily take the inference to be the opposite direction instead of it being useless because the other states are there. It might be used as a justification for the other states to have their laws consistent with the laws of the states that are neighboring them. I got information about delayed abortions in a couple of different places. It'd probably work best if it was a single place. There's a lot of reading, and it sounds like you're rushing during the speech, so pace yourself a little bit more. All right, thank you.